All right. So I think now that's going to bring us into our next topic, which is going to be lore. Lore of these amazing games. So what is the lore of Wizards and Warriors?
Ooh, fill us in.
Oh, man. Like I was saying before, I learned so much about this game. All right. So the main knight that you play as, his name is 𝐂𝐍𝐍𝐄𝐎𝐍, and he's known as the Knight of Excalibur, the Warrior of Books, the Warrior of Books. In the world, you're traveling through the forest of Elrond, and you're getting to the castle of Ironspire to save the princess. I know, totally like brand new kind of ideas going on here. What I didn't know was, so you know when you go to defeat each boss, there's like a princess that comes down. They're damsel in distress. That's what they call them in the book. And
okay.
I didn't know, because in my mind, I'm like thinking like as a little kid, I'm like, okay, this is like Mario 2 or whatever, or Mario 1, where it's like you're saving like the same princess and they're like, oh, the princess is in the wrong castle. But no, it's actually you're saving different like damsels in distress, and they all had names. And yeah, I didn't know, like I was like, okay, I just thought that it was just like generic princess. Well, so the princess, the actual like main princess, doesn't have a name. It's just like princess of this world, like Elrond or whatever.
Okay.
And the first damsel that you save is just called First Damsel. But the next one is Esmeralda, Galadriel, Grisabella, and Penelope. And
Penelope, yep.
You're saving them, Ironspire, Castle Grayskull. You're saving them from this wizard called Malkil. And apparently Malkil was like, he was good at first, and they say that his pupil was Merlin. So he wasn't like a bad guy at first, but then as he got older, he started to lose his mind and go crazy. And I guess he like kidnaps like the princesses and stuff. And you're playing as 𝐂𝐍𝐶 trying to save all of the princesses. Also a part of the lore, they say, is that knight. Remember I was talking about earlier that there was that knight that doesn't let you pass unless you have a gem. He is built into the lore. They don't say that he has a name. He doesn't have a name, but he's just there to just be in your way if you don't collect enough treasure. Okay.
He's just like that. He's always the bouncer at the door. You know, it's like, where's your ID?
Yeah, exactly. He's like, you shall not pass until you give me these gems, which you don't actually give him.
What's your bouncer's name? That's just bouncer. Don't worry about it.
I know. So then you're going through the different areas. So the first area is the Forest of Elrond. The second place is the Ice Cave, Fire Cave. Then they have the Purple Cave. Then the Forest of Elrond 2, the Outer Castle, the Inner Castle, and the Inner Castle 2. And that's the world in Wizards and Warriors 1. It's kind of basic, like the story's kind of basic, but then where I think it gets interesting is in the later games. Like you're still in like Wizards and Warriors 2, you're still battling Malik, or wait, no, sorry, that's not his name. Sorry, my bad. His name, Malky. You're still battling Malky. And then in the second game, like he turns into like these 4 elements, which you have to like then defeat. But it's just a little bit simpler in this game where he's just like, you know, the wizard at the end. And honestly, when I got to the end of that game, it was not as difficult of a fight as I thought it was going to be. Like, I felt like some of the other bosses in the game were going to be easier than, I thought that last boss was going to be like really, really difficult, but it actually really wasn't even. Like the whole game, I was able to beat in less than 3 hours. And I think that's a part of what people conflicting feelings about the game of like, oh, is this like, this game was like kind of easy, but then it's like, it's not that difficult in terms of like maybe some other games, but I think it's like, you know, it's one of the early NES games, and it's a good indicator of what the NES was capable of in terms of like music, visuals, and all that kind of stuff. So it was really cool.
Up a great point, because like I think the hardest aspect really of it was you have so much climbing, and the way that the stages were set up were a lot of times most games they're working with just the screen, and then you'll scroll right maybe, and that's still the same height that you're dealing with. Then you might hit the final wall, the far right wall, and maybe now you have to go up, and again it's going to stay in that screen. Well, Wizards and Warriors, besides a couple of levels like the tree level where you're inside the tree, most of them they are much bigger. So what's the screen in front of you? You can go this way, you can go that way, you can go up in these different corners, and I think that's what made it like, where do I go? I have so many choices, and while you're still learning, you're dying, right? You don't know how to fight correctly, you don't have the right weapons right away. So yeah, I could see why there is that conflict of, no, this game is really hard, while someone who's played it a couple of times like, no, this game's
it's not
easy.
And I think what's cool too about like the way that the game works, items are like stuck in acorns, like you have to like break acorns, like it's like some like kind of like random stuff like acorns, and I forget what the other thing is, but like you have to find items through that. And I don't know, I always thought that that was like really weird, like I wonder why they made that design choice. That's pretty much it for like in terms of like what the lore is about and the plot. Like you're basically playing as this knight, saving the princesses from this evil wizard, getting through to the last part of the castle, and then in the subsequent Wizards and Warriors games, it seems like you're still trying to defeat this wizard that just will not go away. I thought that was like really interesting that they tied it into like the King Arthur style stuff, and being that Merlin was his pupil and stuff like that. Like I thought that was really cool.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because I thought at some point I remember some type of Merlin reference in the game. If there was maybe an item that you get that's like a Merlin's, cloak or something like that. I felt like there was one little instance where they say Merlin, but then when you got to fight the final boss, I'm thinking, oh no, we're fighting a really angry Merlin, and it wasn't Merlin, right? Like you said, it's like Malachi or I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing bosses.
Malkiel.
Okay. Where it's like, oh no, this is not Merlin.
You know what? I kind of feel like I know what you're talking about here. I think I know what you're talking about. Like there might be a reference to Merlin, but I can't remember where. I think it's an item that you pick up.
Right?
I think so. Yeah.
Like, I think that item specifically is what makes the final boss that much easier. Like if you don't have the item, you could still beat the final boss, but it's just harder. It's gonna be a longer fight because it's not as much damage, or maybe you take less damage, so you get to, you don't have to dodge as precisely. I can't remember what it was. But I felt like that Merlin item, if that's what I'm remembering correctly, was something that mattered. And from what I'm seeing here, which I didn't know either, is that the enemies have black magic. Black magic power. I didn't realize that there were like I know the bosses, you can like have to kill them in more than one hit. So that makes sense that they have like this black magic power. But like the regular bosses, I mean, the regular enemies, like most of them only take like one hit. See, like this skull dude, okay, yes, he has this black magic power, but like they're saying that all the enemies in the game have that. Maybe it's just that theirs is weaker. I don't know. How interesting. I didn't know that.
Yep.
I had no idea.
And the warrior has light magic. That's what I got for lore for the game. I know it's like people complained that it was like a super basic concept. Oh, knight goes out to save the princess or whatever. But you know what? Sometimes simple is the good way to go.
Well, and actually, Core brought up a great point, is that, and again, goes back to us talking about like the music and things of this nature, where the game was limited in its data. So it had to pick and choose what they were able to put on the screen, right? And so one of the things is that old games had lore and extra content that was in the manuals because they could not fit it into the game. Otherwise, you wouldn't have a complete, from level 1 to level 7 or whatever level they, ended the game on. And that was really important. And I remember as a kid, and especially my mom, because I always loved going through the manuals. She was like, be careful, those are mine.
Oh,
like,
what?
Oh, yeah, of course. And I'm a kid, me flipping it around like, oh yeah, it's fine.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious. But it does make perfect sense. Yeah, exactly. I think that's why, you know, obviously stuff with like the game box art too, like there's storytelling happening in the game box art and the manual that they just, like you said, could not do in the game. That makes total sense. I don't know why it just took until you said that for me to put 2 and 2 together. But you're 100% right. Yeah. And that is where they did all the story. Like, I guess like back then too, you know, like video games were still a newer media. So, you know, storytelling in that way, you know, people are used to reading books and stuff like that. Like that's always going to be like a thing, you know, like that's how we're going to find the story here. Whereas now you can build whole entire movies into games. So the game is doing the storytelling.
And I'm glad you say that, because I think it's really important, and I think this would be the most important thing if a company wanted to really capture this ability where their game created, let's call it a cult following, right?
Yeah.
Where people are so passionate about the nostalgia of a game that they realize that when people have the ability to read a bunch of the lore in the manual itself, that's at your own pace.
Yeah. Exactly.
When you're experiencing a game, sometimes the game throws stuff at you and you're really not ready for it. You want to keep on going quicker because you're right. You want to fight some more, or you only have like 30 minutes before you have to go somewhere. So you're like, no, go through the cutscene. I want to go play the game some more. And now you missed out on some of that story because you weren't able to take it at the pace that you once got to as a kid, where it's like, okay, well, I'm not allowed to play. I'm only allowed to have an hour, playing games, because it's a weekday. So I'm going to read the book.
Yep.
My mom would be so happy I'm reading books, right?
Yep.
If it was a video game manual, Nintendo Power, things of that nature. Definitely.
Yeah. And one thing that's also cool about that is sometimes they would hide stuff in there that you would have to use in the game, like in Star Tropics or in Metal Gear. That's always like really cool too. So it's like you're rewarded for doing that extra reading,
Like that. I'm glad you brought that up. Those little Easter eggs that are hidden in the games, again, give it that, it makes it feel real.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
It takes a game from it being just fantasy and just escapism to where there's something of substance. You're like, I had to do this part of it, and I think that matters, and that's why I think it's so important that while we're talking about this series is that we want to talk about these different aspects, like the lore of a lot of games, because that's really where a lot of this came from, right? Like why we care about these games, be it the music, be it the game design, be it the little Easter eggs, like in Star Tropics. I remember how big of a deal that was to get the paper wet.
Oh my God, yeah.
Yeah, it mattered.
Yeah,
that was a big deal. And it was like, and I remember one of my friends who had the game lost that piece of paper, right?
Yeah.
And then went back to play the games like, I don't know what to put in for the cup. I lost it all.
Yeah.
I was like, don't worry, I'll go home. Ride my bike all the way home, go and look through all the things. I found it, dude. It's right back home.
Oh my gosh. So let's switch over to some awesome Mega Man lore.
Okay, so here's the first thing that everyone needs to know. Mega Man is not the original name of the game.
What?
The original name of this game is Rockman.
Oh!
So when you see a game that looks just like Mega Man, now this is number 3, but same idea.
Yeah.
I've got number 2 just to keep you all up. There we go. Haha, there we go. See, I'm ready. It's actually called Rockman, and here's what happened, all right, is in Japan, it is Rockman, and to this day, it's still Rockman. Rockman 1, Rockman 2, 3, 4, 5, Rockman X1, Rockman X4. It's Rockman.
Mm-hmm.
So here's what happened. In the States, there was an individual, a moderate artist, musical, his name, he copyrighted Rockman.
Mm-hmm.
So the company, Capcom, especially because remember, this is really early in their days. Nowadays, they could buy the IP out for the individual and buy the trademark and say, hey, we want to buy this from you. You'd probably be like, that's a lot of money, I'll take it. But back then, they're like, you want how much for that name? Never mind. That's why in the States, we got Mega Man.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. It's something as simple as at that early stages of that company, they're like, we can't afford to buy out your trademark, you know, especially if you're asking that much for it. I couldn't find the exact totals on there. I didn't want to give any, like, I didn't want to give wrong numbers for something like that, but they weren't going to budge on paying for something like that. Yeah. We'll just do a name change. And it's so funny because for me, Mega Man, especially back then, because you had Mario, but then Mega Man, because you feel so attached to this guy, but he's an android. Yeah. You know, he's not even human. He showcased a little bit of human emotion from time to time, but really he's just, hey, yeah, Dr. Light, I'll go and do what you want me to do. It just made him feel larger than life, even though he's this little guy in his blue suit just trying to, you know, make sure Dr. Wily doesn't mess up the world.
I know
so
that
that's one thing I thought was important.
Yeah, I think one thing that I think outside of like the video game realm is that a lot of people compare Mega Man to Astro Boy. I wonder if anything with the lore with that has like anything to do with each other, because that was a popular cartoon back then, right?
Yes, it was. Like big time. Astro Boy was a big deal, especially in Japan, let alone out here once it finally got its way this direction.
Yes. Interesting. I always loved, like, you know, the whole story of, because I always wondered, like, all right, I beat Dr. Wily, we got through his castle, whatever, but then he comes back in the next game. How does he keep coming back?
Okay, I'm glad you brought that up as well. So one of the aspects of it was that they always hoped to keep on making more of the Mega Mans, right? They really felt they had a good idea with Dr. Light being this Santa-looking type doctor scientist, you know, and Dr. Wily looking like a really good curmudgeon, almost kind of Scrooge-like. Yeah. You know, they really felt they had a good balance of good science versus bad science. You know, what can happen when you have these things and someone who's doing it for the good versus someone who's doing it for their own ego and control. And that it's funny because eventually you get to hear even more of that backstory, which is released in Mega Man 11. For those that have not watched that beginning cutscene to that game, you get an even deeper understanding of why there was such a separation, such an angst between the two of them. And they thought they could keep on making more, and it was really cool that, what was it, Mega Man, is it Mega Man 4? I think it's Mega Man 4. Finally, we're like, wait a second, there is, Wily's gone? It's Dr. 𝐂𝐐𝐔? Oh my gosh. You know, come to find out, Dr. 𝐂𝐐𝐔 was actually just being held at ransom to do this because his daughter was captured by Wily. And then finally he gets his daughter back. He's like, I'm not gonna be bad anymore, man. I got my daughter back. It's totally cool. Like, I don't want to fight you, you know? And it's like, uh-oh, now we're going off to Wily's castle again. And so it became this inside joke of like, nope, Wily's here again. Of course he is. How could he not be?
He's always gonna keep coming back.
He's gonna find a way back, no matter how much you dislike him and his wiggling eyebrows, he's coming back.
That's funny. Do they talk about, like, you know, maybe some of the origins of like why there's like animal robots in the game? Because that's what a lot of the enemies are in the game. It's like either animal robots or based on nature and stuff like that.
Yes. So, okay, so to explain the world of Mega Man, especially the classic version, is that all the robots were initially made to go ahead and make life continue on, and make life easier for humans. So you have certain robots that were meant to go ahead and be cleaning robots. You had other ones that were meant to be construction robots. You had other animals located in places that had been endangered or had died out, and yet they wanted to represent them in robot form. Well, why do they turn against you? Dr. Wily reprograms a majority of them, where Dr. Light is left with just a couple of his own robots.
Got it.
And so that's why at that point in time, you're fighting so many, what would seem like, why am I fighting these bunnies? What the heck?
Yeah.
You know, why do I gotta fight you? It's because Dr. Wily is controlling them, and that's why they are bad. They're under a, if you want to call it mind control, whatever you want to refer to it as, but they were under the control of Dr. Wily. So that's what happened there.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, because I'm like, playing Mega Man 3, I'm like, I don't want to shoot this cute little cat robot, please.
I love the post you put of the little toe beans.
I know, like such attention to detail. I was like, this is incredible. Like, I felt like that would, like, in my little kid mind, they would not put all of that detail in. But the fact that it's like they made it feel like a real animal, I was like, oh man, this game is so charming, you know?
Yes. I that was one thing I really appreciate about my preferred titles of the entire Mega Man series, including into the Mega Man X and whatnot, was all the titles that they really honed in that attention to detail. A couple of titles later on, they start to try to get too graphic intensive, and I think that's what hurts the attention to detail, because now they're trying to handle too many things and they have a deadline and they try to get it out on time. But yeah, that attention to detail, when they got it right on so many titles, where simply like, you felt like this exact moment of time was worth the entire time I spent playing this game. With that was 3, 4, 5 hours, but that one moment that you're on that stage where you saw the cat's toe beans, you're like, that was worth it.
I know.
Right there.
So true. And even some things like what I'm seeing in the video here, like the movement of the shrimp, and like they just got so many elements down. It reminds me of kind of like Miyazaki, the animator who does like all those really awesome films. Like his mantra is you have to make something look and feel like real life. If you make it look and feel like real life, then you're going to immerse the people who are, you know, enjoying that content. And I feel like that's a lot of what this game gets right, is like you said, in other aspects of it, like the music and the lore and the science, even the physics thing that you talked about earlier, which was so freaking cool. Like, so then this, another thing that adds into like what makes this game so awesome is like elements like that.
And I think that's what speaks volumes for when it actually becomes a series. Not just a single game, right? But becomes a series. Not that single games by them standalone could be just amazing and we can just appreciate it for that. But when we can justify a series, and we know there's some series that we've seen out there where we're like, why are you still making them? Like this, each sequel's getting worse than the, you know, previous one. Like, stop now. You know, I'm not going to spend $80 on that.
Yeah.
That was the impact, right? That it was worth every single penny. It was worth every single minute spent on it, even if they were agonizing at some point. Because, you know, we don't like to die all the time.
Yeah.
We want to progress in video games.
Yeah.
But once you beat it, you really felt like, I did it.
Yeah.
They really capture those kind of elements because it felt real off the simple aspects of, like you talked about, that Miyazaki likes to apply to the like Studio Ghibli movies and whatnot, where it needs to feel real. We know it's a cartoon. We know it's a video game and it's pixel, but you need to look at it and say, oh, cool, that bunny rabbit jumps like a bunny rabbit.
Yeah. Yeah.
That fish swims like a fish.
Yeah.
Those little attention to details make you feel you're in the world, and that was a big deal.
Yep. Chico said that Mega Man's hair was modeled after General's hair for the real life feel.
In here. Let's get a fan going. We get it all flowing around. Yeah, it's pretty close.
How about Rockman's sister being rock and roll, and treble and bass?
That's all intentional. That's why a lot of people got confused. Like, why is she called Roll? But if you knew the original title, you'd go back to the fact that he's called Rockman, not Mega Man. And it's like, oh, Rockman, Roll, Rush. The dog's name's Rush because it's based off the band name.
What? I didn't know that.
That's all. Mega Man as a whole really is Rockman, which is really supposed to be a whole musical. That's why they were so addicted to making good music for the game. Proto Man's another great example. Is all those things are supposed to be, the elements are supposed to be music for you to be like, oh, this is the good side of things, while all the elemental things, life and everything, is stuck in this elemental grind. That is supposed to represent the real harsh world.
What? Also, I think it might be interesting. I think somebody else asked earlier, like, what about some of the, like, maybe are there like cultural impacts, being that, you know, like a lot of games that we play were developed or designed in Japan. Like, were there any cultural things that they put into the art style of the game? Like this enemy, for example, that we're looking at right now, looks like, you know, something from Japanese lore. Does that, any of those have any imprints of like what's going on in the Mega Man universe?
Big time, because initially when the games were being made, it's to the Japanese audience.
Yeah.
Because Japan was much more willing to be involved in the video game landscape before the States were. The States were mostly concerned, does it sell? Like, that was realistically the #1 thing the States cared about. They didn't care if the kids were happy. They didn't care if the parents were okay with the kids playing games that are violent or non-violent. They cared, does it sell?
Yeah.
But for Japan, this was much more of an impact, where this was a way for them to take something that is silly, cute, fun, and you can play it.
Yeah.
Which is such an interesting aspect, you know, when thinking about it. It's like, we want you to play the game because you think that it is something that you want to get lost in, not, oh, are we just going to make money? We know times have changed, and obviously there's aspects that have made it more about the money than before. But that was why there's a lot of times you're going to see things that you'd be like, I don't recognize this. This thing looks mad and angry.
Yeah.
But it would fit in the lore of Japanese lore, correct?
Yeah. That reminds
Just
me,
like the sumo looking air
Yeah.
machines.
yeah. Ah, yeah, that makes sense. And then it makes you look at some of these things like, oh, I wonder if this is a reference to something. Like, I never go back and think about these things. Like, you're playing a game, you're just playing the game, right?
Yeah,
but then when you have time to, yeah, exactly, you're trying to survive. But then when you have really time to like really sit down and like dissect how the game is being made, why they made certain design choices, why did they put this into an element of the story, then you're like, oh, let me peel back the layers and find out more about what really makes this game tick. And I think that that's really cool, a lot of the stuff that you brought up.
And likewise, the stuff that you had brought up, like, it just shows you two different games, two different companies entirely, right? That to get it to make it work, all these different aspects had to come together. So one of the things I do want to, for those that don't know Mega Man 2, like, well, I know you're talking about this. I know I've heard of Mega Man, of course, because I've seen the different games and stuff like that. But for those that don't know, when this game was created, this is the actual background story of the game. Mega Man 2 took place in the year 2000X. Because they wanted to represent the first decade of the 21st century. Remember, this game was released in the 80s, 1988, for those of you that don't know. And so they wanted to put something that seems so far-fetched.
Yeah.
A lot of anime was also the same idea. If you ever watch things like Robotech,
Yeah.
the year 2000 was this big old science and everything's going to explode.
Yeah.
Technology's going to explode. We're going to be flying around in mechs and things of this nature. So Mega Man took a little bit out of that, out of the book of anime, and was like, you know what? Yeah, we like that idea. And so that super robot was named Mega Man, was created by Dr. Light. That's the good one. And again, Dr. Light, why is he named Dr. Light? Because the yin and yang of things, Dr. Light was supposed to represent the good.
Yeah.
While Dr. Wily, even though he's not called Dr. Dark, he's called Dr. Wily because Wily, again, is supposed to get across the idea of someone who's kind of,
Reckless.
conniving,
Yeah.
sneaky, like you were going to say, and his ambition was to conquer the world in Mega Man. How after he got defeated, he then comes back with 8 robots this time because he realized 6 wasn't good enough in the first game. He's like, we didn't have enough resources. We need more. Let's go ahead and take him on. Oh, that's right. Okay, so what's really cool for those that haven't played the game, or maybe you have played it and you're kind of curious, when you beat the alien Wily, what the heck was that all about? Like, it was, you were fighting an alien, but then you find out he's sitting behind some control desk. What's going on there?
Yeah.
What happened there actually is the reason why your bubble weapon, called bubble lead. A lot of people like to call it bubble lead.
Yeah.
It's called bubble lead. And the idea behind that is that you were actually short circuiting this little hologram machine that was flying around the room. That's why when you beat it, there's just this tiny little purple circular kind of disc in the middle before it finally stops moving. Is that was supposed to short circuit it. You finally broke that. He had nothing left to use against you, and he's like, okay, you got me.
Wow. Wow, I'm learning so much. This is so cool. Oh man.
When you ask like, hey, but Wily, Dr. Wily gets away.
Yeah.
If you notice at the end of Mega Man 2, the doctor actually has no means of getting away. And so when he gets defeated, you notice he's begging for forgiveness, for mercy, because he has no way of getting out, because they thought with this being a passion project, this was the final time they would get to do a Mega Man. So they were trying to wrap up the series right there. And then after Mega Man 3, they get the green light on Mega Man 3 because they sold 1.5 million copies in the year 1988, slowly wrapping into 1999 because they when they released it versus a whole year going around. In that full year, they sold 1.5 million copies of that game. They're like, you know what, we're going to green light another one. That's why after that, he keeps on having escape methods, is because, oh, we're going to get a chance to keep on rolling with this.
That is nuts. First of all, I can't even imagine a game selling over 1 million copies in the, was it like late 80s, early 90s, right?
Yeah. 88, and then, of course, the second half of 88, the first half of 89, 1.5 million copies.
Jeez, man. That's why Mega Man is the cultural phenomenon. I'm muted.
Yeah.
The developers. Yeah. Cool.
This is going to be really cool, honestly, because like we've started already kind of talking about it a little bit, but now we're going to really dive into it.
Yeah.
And I think it's important a lot of the times, especially if it's a game that you enjoy, is understanding kind of like in some instances, the heartache that some of these individuals had to go through to create these passion projects where we know the game title, but so often we don't know who they were.
Yeah.
Unless you did the research to make sure you knew. They're not talking about, oh, well, it was this person and this person and this person. They might pick just the lead, and that's the only person that you get to hear about, Yeah. And I think it's really important what we're going to cover in this next section, because it's actually really interesting, some of the limitations working with these old school games that are going to be on display once again.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think it's so interesting to learn how these companies started and what they're based in, because sometimes I feel like they tell their story through some of these games. So it's really, really cool. So when we want to talk about the developers of Wizards and Warriors, what I learned, I'm over here playing video games without even knowing like anything about them. It's like shame on me, I learned that Wizards and Warriors was developed by Rare and published by Acclaim. It was published by somebody else, I think, in Europe and Japan. It was Rare's second game. Literally game number 2. I think the first game was called Slalom. What do they call it when, like you're skiing down? I don't know how to say that word.
Yeah.
Slalom. Slalom. There you go. There. Yeah, that's it.
Wow. This is their first, real game.
Yeah. So this is their first platformer adventure game. This is game number 2 for Rare. And I didn't know that Rare was started by 2 brothers. I had no idea about that. Yeah.
I didn't know that either.
Tim Stamper and Chris Stamper. They were the ones that started Rare. That to me, I was like, what? I didn't know that. So it was developed by a UK-based company, Rare, for the Nintendo Entertainment System and released by Acclaim. Acclaim, unfortunately, is now defunct. But they also developed, I think, Mortal Kombat and a bunch of other games that we know and love. Well, that's what I recall whenever I think of Acclaim is Mortal Kombat. It will later be released by the same company in Europe in January 7th, 1990. So it came out 3 years later, because in America it came out in 1987. And it was released in Japan by Jalico. Oh my God. Could you imagine if it was released? Every time I think of Jalico, I always think of Back to the Future and some of those other terrible games. But anyway, or I might be thinking of that other bad. I'm thinking of LJN. Never mind.
Oh, you're thinking of LJ.
Yeah, I'm thinking of LJN.
Totally different.
Under the title Densetsu no Kishi Elron, Legendary Knight Elron, the game would be Rare's second release after Solemn, and the game's soundtrack is composed by David Wise, which we knew. You know what I forgot to say before about the art? That one of the artists in this game, in Wizards and Warriors, is a woman. I didn't know that.
Oh.
See, like back then, my little kid brain was like, yo, I did not know that, you know, there were women like working in the video game industry. And if I had known that like as a little kid, I'd have been like, yo, this is really cool. I just think that that's really awesome to know that there was a woman working on the art for this game. So
I'm glad you said that, because like literally I thought it was such a weird thing that my mom, being a female, played video games, right? Because growing up, I know none of the gals that I was around in class would ever talk about video games, right? So like to me, it always felt like such a boys thing to do. But then it's like at the same time, I also knew my mom,
yeah,
you know, fully a female, right?
Yeah.
Where I'm like, nope, she loves video games, and it'd been so much more interesting had we gotten to learn about that much earlier on, that we could have been able to like just know those aspects that's so much more diverse than what they obviously initially showcased to us.
Same thing with my mom. Like, my mom is out here playing more difficult games than I am, out here playing Dark Souls and all this stuff. So, yeah, I think that it's really cool to recognize that fact because, you know, it's, I don't know, it's inspiring to me at least. Let's talk a little bit about Rare. Rare, I didn't know, like I said, was founded by those two brothers, which was really, really cool. And of course, they go on to create, you know, Donkey Kong, Banjo and Kazooie, and Conquer, and a bunch of other games that we know and love. And to know that one of my favorite games, Wizards and Warriors, was like one of the foundations for this awesome company was like, wow. Now it makes sense why I love this game so much. Tim and Chris Stamper, who are the brothers that started, for Wizards and Warriors, they worked on, one of them worked on the art and the visuals and the graphics in the game, and the other one programmed the game, the actual Wizards and Warriors game. So we were going back to saying, like, you know, small teams developing these games. Like, I really think like back then they didn't have like teams of like hundreds of people. It was literally one person doing like all the stuff. You know what I'm saying? Like, one or two people.
There was a digital composer. That person's job was the music. Right?
Yeah.
There was the artwork, which a lot of times in that instance was not actually on the game. It was everything outside the game. You know. Then there was the programmer.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like a program, like think about that.
A
programmer for a lot of our favorite games. It's like, that's so mind boggling to think about when you have lost time, like you said, teams of 50 to 100 per position.
Yeah, exactly. And somebody else said earlier in the chat that a lot of people go unaccredited in games and stuff, including women. And that to me is always like an interesting thing when you go back and you want to learn like who did this and who did that. And then sometimes you find, like how you said in Mega Man, like the music was unaccredited. Those things were, I guess, very commonplace back then. Chris and Tim Stamper also went on to develop stuff for the ZX Spectrum. And yeah, after reverse engineering the Nintendo Entertainment System and deciding to shift their focus on console development, the brothers founded Rare in the mid-1980s, and they became Nintendo's first major Western developer, for whom they developed licensed game ports. And over the next 2 decades, Rare enjoyed a close relationship with Nintendo and developed multiplayer titles, including Donkey Kong, GoldenEye, and, of course, Wizards and Warriors. So,
yeah.
That is a bit about the... Unfortunately, they don't talk a lot about how actually Wizards and Warriors was developed. Like, they just talk about, like, you know, it was published by Acclaim and developed by Rare. And we don't know a lot about like the actual, like, okay, what happened? Why did they design this game element like this or this game element like that? Like, there's not a lot of information out there about it. Okay. But if anybody knows where we can find that information and read about it, I would certainly love to do that.
That'd be really cool. Like that's some of the aspects to me that I find so fascinating. I'm thankful that, you know, for this Mega Man 2, that's one of the aspects they really like to dive into when, you know, you're deep diving on this game, is finding out those aspects, because to me it just creates such a level of appreciation. Just like you bringing up the, like, had you known that on one of your favorite games that a female had done so much of what you are like, I love this, I love seeing this, where that could have inspired you that much sooner.
Yep, exactly.
You know?
Exactly. Because you just don't know, like I say, you just don't know until you know, you know?
Yep.
So it's
Correct.
really cool to go back and like learn, okay, well, how did this game get started? Why did they, who worked on it and stuff like that? So I think as we go along in time, because clearly video games are, you know, surpassing movies in terms of like budget and advertising and profitability and accessibility.
Yeah.
More of those stories are going to be told, you know, because it's becoming just as viable as any other form of media.
Big time. And like, what is one of the aspects I think is so important about video games, before I go and dive into anything on the Mega Man 2 aspect of the developer story, is that there is a script you're following, right? They have an idea of what they want to play, but at the same time, you still control the story.
Mm-hmm.
And we know there's other games that add so much more levels into your choice making abilities, right? And they have divergent storylines that go with that. But I think it's so important, just like when we're reading books, right? Is that reading books, we have a vision that is completely different a lot of times than our best friend who is reading the same book. Right? You're like, oh yeah, this guy, so he kind of looks like this. He's got the, you know, he's gonna be a little bit more slender. He's gonna be kind of built like this, with like the wider shoulders, the slender waist. No. Are you kidding me? He definitely doesn't have shoulders. He's all biceps. Haven't you been reading? You know, you get this whole conversation and this like, no, it's this. And that's what's so cool about those aspects. And again, going back to playing video games, it's so cool that you're the one doing the action versus, obviously, I love movies, I like TV shows, and there's times where that's the perfect thing to do, is just kick back and relax and watch it. But there's other times where you want to be involved, and I think that's where video games really hits the mark.
Exactly.